Hey guys, what's up? Today I'll be doing an album review for the band Dying Fetus with their third full-length album that came out in the year 2000 titled Destroy the Opposition. And throughout Dying Fetus's now fairly large discography, they have always been a band that's operated within a pretty specific confines and style of a mix of hardcore, brutal, and technical death metal. But within that, all of their albums kind of display a specific sound within that range. So a lot of their early albums had a bit more of a grind tinge, and as they went on, there was a mix of albums being more brutal death metal, more technical death metal, or more hardcore based. And this is kind of a neat album because it falls third. So this is kind of at the tail end of their early days, but I would still consider it probably their last chapter of Dying Fetus's early days. And this is a really neat album because to me, this is probably their most hardcore influenced. And that's something I really enjoy about this record. I'm not really a hardcore fan at all, but for some reason, when Dying Fetus combines hardcore elements with brutal death metal, it really clicks with me, and therefore I'm a huge fan of this album. With the opener, Praise the Lord, Opium of the Masses, right away you just get pummeled by probably one of the most memorable riffs in all of grindcore death metal. I mean, the opening track is just absolutely awesome. And Dying Fetus really goes on, especially in the first two tracks on this release. They display really their good skills on the instrument. John Gallagher, he does a lot of sweeping and some tapping on the first two tracks. And it's cool because it's kind of a little bit flashy, but it's not something that takes away from the main point of Dying Fetus, which is heavy breakdowns and gnarly drums. And Dying Fetus operates as a four-piece band here, and all the members are really just spot on all their instrument playing. You have John Gallagher on guitar and vocals, Jason Netherton on bass and vocals, Kevin Talley on drums, and Sparky Voiles on second guitar. And all four of these guys are just super locked in. I think the first two songs are probably the most like death metal oriented. Those have like a lot of blast beats and a lot of trem pick stuff, and some really good like old school New York hardcore influence breakdowns throughout the whole album. But most notably, in the first track, there's a really good section that's just total like beat down 90s New York hardcore, which is really cool. And as the album goes on, you get a little bit of a change in pace. After the first two songs, the next two tracks, Born in Sodom and Epidemic of Hate, that's definitely where that hardcore influence really starts to peek through. I would say the song Epidemic of Hate, at least guitar-wise, is pretty much like a pure hardcore song. There's not a whole lot of death metal on that track. But of course, what Dying Fetus does really well is they combine that with blast beats and a lot of double bass to give it that death metal drumming vibe, which is just a really energetic style of drumming. Kevin Talley is definitely one of my favorite drummers, and he's just a master on the kit. He has really good speed and really cool groovy ideas. And then the next song, Pissing in the Mainstream, I feel like that one kind of goes back a little bit to their grind roots. That is just a really mean and ferocious, straightforward, quick song. That has a lot. It's basically just a mixture of a sweep picking riff, some tremolo parts, and then an insanely heavy breakdown at the end. It kind of reminds me of what they did on their previous album, Killing on Adrenaline, with Kill Your Mother, Rape Your Dog. Just like a really short, in-your-face blast beat, then breakdown style of song. And then rounding out the album, the last three tracks, In Times of War, For Us or Against Us, and Justifiable Homicide, are also very strong. Jason Netherton wrote the music for two tracks on here, In Times of War and Justifiable Homicide, and I like how you can kind of tell his writing apart from John. But they definitely don't clash at all. It's not like a bad change of pace, but you can tell someone else is writing those songs, and they all seem pretty like-minded, and I think that's what makes this album flow very well. While this is not my favorite Dying Fetus album, I will say I think this is the best display of their songwriting. The way they structure these tracks and the way they bring back certain riffs, I think is done the best on here. And I think the clearest example of that will be in the first two songs. Just a really good framework of how the songs move along, what they bring back, what they choose not to bring back, I think is done very, very well. Yeah, this is just an overall really good album. I think even if you don't like death metal and you're a hardcore fan, you can probably enjoy this release. Just because the riffing is so, and a lot of the vocal patterns are so inspired by old school hardcore. John Gallagher, like early Dying Fetus, delivers his super guttural and caustic death metal vocals, while Jason Netherton does more of that hardcore yell vocals. And one thing I do find myself missing on this album is the nasty grind vocals. I could see why they started to move away from it. It does seem a bit of a natural progression for the band. I know they were trying to just get a little bit more of that, not a cleaner sound, but I can totally understand not having as many grind vocals on this record. But I do find myself missing Jason Netherton's just nasty yells that were on like the demos and Purification Through Violence, and a little bit of Killing on Adrenaline. But like I said, at the same time, I totally understand they probably wouldn't fit well on this album. But this thing is just a beast, both in speed, breakdowns, riffing. There's a fair amount of technicality on here. It's nothing too crazy, but at the same time, when they sweep, it does feel really cool and really flashy in a neat way. So that's something I really respect about Dying Fetus. If I were to choose one track on here, it will probably be Justifiable Homicide. Close second will be Praise the Lord, Opium of the Masses, the opener. Yeah, this album is just super crushing. In terms of my Dying Fetus ranking, Killing on Adrenaline is my favorite, and then I can't really decide if this or Purification Through Violence will be second, but right now I'd probably give this silver in Dying Fetus discography ranking. But anyway, if you haven't heard this album, I would say it's actually probably a pretty good place to start for the Dying Fetus discography, because it's still like their classic early sound, but is also a precursor to kind of what they would go on to do and cleaning up their sound just a little bit. But highly recommend. I'll give this album an 8.5 out of 10. Super solid release. So yeah, that's Dying Fetus, Destroy the Opposition. Thanks for watching.